Hi, class. Today we're going to be talking about racial tropes and arguments in American empire in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So, the first argument I want to talk about, or the first racial trope rather, is this idea of nativism. Nativism was an idea that foreign born people were a danger and a threat to the prosperity, the livelihood, and the success of native born Americans. And again, as this is a very racially coded argument, it's specifically referring to native born Americans as essentially white Anglo Saxon Protestants. And we see a really good example of this in this particular cartoon. We see an Irishman, we see a German, with his little Kaiser mustache, and, both of them are drunk. And the German is snoring loudly, the Irishman is yelling and screaming drunkenly, and the Uncle Sam character and the sort of Lady Liberty character, though they are in this boarding house, which represents America, accepting many races, they are obviously not the best for it, according to this nativist cartoon. Now, I want you to take some time to read the final two paragraphs from this piece, Why the Chinese Should Be Excluded by James D. Fallon. At the time, he's a mayor of San Francisco, and his arguments are really excellent examples of nativism. Now, I really want you to look at kind of what constitutes these arguments and everything. Specifically, he's really looking at how the Chinese themselves, they may be good laborers, but are terrible citizens because of, various kind of racist and, degrading arguments that Fallon makes. So the other big racial argument that we have, in the general argument about U.S. imperialism and U.S. expansion is the white man's burden. And whereas nativism kind of has an attitude that expansion is a bad thing, the white man's burden is more in favor of expansion. And this idea is the idea that Western civilization and white people had a duty to civilize the various non-white people of the world and teach them the superiority of white Western civilization. And in this cartoon particularly, we kind of see that in how, this is inherently sort of a nasty job. You have this screaming, bloody, sword-wielding Chinese person, and the American figure, the Uncle Sam, is kind of begging the other one to stop. He's got a little cart that says progress. He's theoretically bringing all of these aspects of Western civilization, railroad ties, education, trains, to China. And he has this little sign here underneath it, over his cannon, that force will be used if necessary. And so at this point, I want you to take a moment to read Rudyard Kipling's The White Man's Burden. And I want you to look, who are the half devils and half children that he's referring to? And, think about whether or not what Rudyard Kipling is advocating his readers to do, does it actually sound pleasant or a fun, enjoyable thing to do? And, why is he asking them to do it anyway? That kind of is one of the main parts of the white man's burden. However, a lot of white Americans were arguing about race and expansion. There were non-white people in America too who were arguing that these various tropes were inherently wrong. I want you to take a minute to read Li Chu's Chinese Immigrants Confront Anti-Chinese Prejudices and Black Americans talking about, a debate whether or not to enlist to serve in American Wars of Expansion, and in the They Are Ready to Enlist. Li Chu's piece kind of deflates the nativist argument, talking about how the Chinese are actually extremely beneficial to the health of America and its economy, that in fact they are good citizens, and it's simply just these racist ideas that portray them as anything else. And the Black Americans who are debating whether to serve in the military of these foreign wars of expansion, they note that American civilization is maybe not all that civilized, especially when considering their treatment at the government's hands. And in addition, it kind of also deflates the idea of the white man's burden of, if American society and Western society is so great, then, why are we putting so much energy into bringing it to other places when we have these really horrible discriminatory policies here at home? So these are just some of the arguments used to justify and argue against expansion by America using racist arguments.